Alright, how's it going, guys? So we've got the patch notes for the next patch. It's going to be dropped. It's pretty interesting. It's nothing too crazy. We do have some pretty significant changes, obviously. But obviously that's why I'm making the video. But it's nothing really too crazy. We've seen crazier patches in the past. We've seen characters get broken like you become useless kind of way. We've seen characters become broken in an overpowered kind of way. I don't think we're really going to be seeing anything that drastic right here. I don't think there's going to be any shifts from who is now the best character or who is now the worst character. But we do have some interesting changes, and I did kind of want to go over them. I thought it'd be fun, so just want to give my initial reactions to some of this stuff, kind of try to analyze some of these changes. Obviously, there are going to be A, my opinions, and B, my initial reaction. The last time I made a patch notes video, it was actually on the time that we had the Alex change, where they removed his channel time on not Devastating, what am I thinking? I'm thinking Pokemon, on Desperate Throw, oh my god, good god, on a Desperate Throw, and then they added a channel time or something to Stealth. And I looked at that, and I got that completely wrong just because it was my initial reaction. Again, like it was completely wrong. I looked at it, I'm like, yo, this is a terrible nerf for Alex when it was actually like one of the biggest buffs he's gotten in a while. So obviously, I am prone to mistakes, so if I make a mistake, let me know in the comments what you think, if you disagree with me, anything like that, what you're looking forward to in this meta, anything like that. But that being said, let's kind of move on to some of the changes. So the first changes are fairly straightforward. We've got the aptitude change. Now, this is kind of interesting because counterattack was never really used before you got the additional mastery, and that's really why counterattack has been so good and has been such a prevalent force in the meta for such a long time. Is because you gained additional mastery. That was why he was so good. That was why he was so strong. Removing this right here is basically going to be removing counterattack from ranked play, I suppose. I mean, sure, there'll probably still be there will probably still be people who use counterattack to a certain extent, but like I said, what I'm trying to say is essentially counterattack was used for the additional mastery. Without the additional mastery, it's not really worth it to buy counterattack every 10 days when you could be buying something like Accelerate, or even just using something kind of tried and true like Breadseek if you really want. So that's kind of all I have to say about counterattack. It was really good. It is no longer really good. The change is pretty big. Like counterattack used to be like counterattack used to be like the best aptitude in the game. Like there's people who liked Accelerate. Me being one of them, I personally preferred Accelerate, and I think between Accelerate and counterattack, it was down to the person's personal preference. But counterattack was almost strictly a better aptitude. Like it was better in setting you up. Accelerate was better for kind of sustaining you. Kind of inventory-wise and stuff like that. But anyways, counterattack is no longer the dominating force that it has been. Scout, you have a little bit of extra time. I don't think that's really going to make much of a difference. I mean, now with counterattack out of the way, you've got an extra aptitude slot for something you just throw in. So if you're really a huge fan of Scout, then yeah, you can throw it in right now, and you can get a little bit of extra time. But essentially, what I think right here is Accelerate is the aptitude to go for right now. Accelerate or Breadseek, either or. If you're cheap, stick with Breadseek. But Accelerate is very, very powerful right now, and it really has no competition for other aptitudes that you would have to pay for. Moving into the character changes, we've got some interesting ones. What changes to William? You'll see a pretty significant change to his health, and this is interesting because William has always been a stat stick in a sense. William has always been he's always been reliant like almost entirely off of his stats because his abilities are next to non-existent. Like Inning Eater isn't really an ability. Look at Inning Eater as if it's just he has a higher stamina bar, so just pretend his stamina is a little bit better, a little bit higher. Even though it is pretty high, just pretend William's stamina is a little bit higher, and then that essentially removes Inning Eater from an ability. Breaking Ball is not an ability that changes the tide of a fight. It really isn't. Like, it doesn't add any additional damage, any skill damage, and its cooldown is, while the cooldown is short, it's not short enough that you can use it like twice a fight consistently. So while the idea of pressuring their stamina might seem good, you're only pressuring their stamina once, and that's really not going to be enough to pressure them in an actual fight. Like if you were able to get 2 breaking balls off every single fight consistently, then I would agree that yeah, you can put some pressure on their stamina bar. I can agree with that. But as long as it's only one, like consistently, right? Like as long as you can only hit them once consistently a fight, it's really not putting that much pressure onto them. So at the end of the day, the I've said this before and I'll say it again about William is he is very very predictable, very predictable. And I'll explain that for in a sec. But the reason why, even though he was very predictable in the past, he has kind of excelled in a certain extent is because of his stats. He had very very good stats. He had good starting stats. He had very good stats that scaled into the late game. His stats were fantastic. They were really, really nice. They were like Leon tier stats. The only reason he wasn't like as good as Leon is because he kind of has to rely off of throw mastery, which is a little bit harder to kind of micromanage, I would say. But like his stats are really good essentially. So nerfing his health is actually pretty big. It's pretty annoying for him because his health is really kind of one of the main stats that he relied on. His attack isn't really anything to write home about. It's not bad, but it's certainly not really that good. You get 14 up to 51. That's nothing too crazy. Nothing too good, nothing too bad. But like I said before, he really excelled off of that health stat when you get to it. So I really think this change is going to push Williams' usage down a lot. And I think a lot of people see this right here and they don't think it's going to be that big of a change, but really, I personally think it really is a huge change, and I kind of want to talk about what I meant by unpredictability. So, if you want to think about a character, who's a good example? Uh, I guess it really there's a lot of characters. Like for instance, I guess Yuki. You can talk about Yuki. You can talk about Bernice. You could like any of these characters that have very strong abilities. It makes him very unpredictable because he can use those abilities to change the tide of a fight. If you get hit with the Uchi Otashi, that's going to have a lot of potential to swing the fight around in their favor. If you get hit with the leg shot, that's going to have a lot of opportunity to swing the battle around in your favor. Same for something like a Blaze, same for something like Phony Deal. Phony Deal is a really good example. Corner Attack to a certain extent as well. So all these abilities are very, very powerful in their unpredictability and their ability to kind of turn the tides of a fight. William has nothing really to go on other than his stats. So once you start bringing his stats away from being stellar and down into the not really, I wouldn't really say they're mediocre. I wouldn't really call them mediocre, but they certainly can't kind of pull their weight without anything supporting them. Being like you said, abilities or ways to change the tide of the change the way the battle's going, and like in itself, throw in itself can't just do it by itself. So I think this is actually a really really significant change. I personally do. I think this is going to really change his usage, really change his win rates. I think it's probably I would say probably one of the biggest changes in the patch right here. There's also another big change to there's not that really that many changes to characters, but there are 2 character changes that I think are very very significant, and William is one of them. Moving on to Magnus, he gets a little bit more stamina. That's kind of cool for him. Nothing too crazy, he just gets a little. Well, I mean, he doesn't get a little bit more stamina. He gets a fairly significant amount of stamina. We go 100 to 112, so that's pretty nice. Um, I mean, you look at, we've got 140 to 128, which is about a 12-point change, and then you've got 100 to 112, which is another 12-point change. So that's pretty interesting when you think of it like that. He gets more stamina. That's all you can really say. It's nice. It's a nice little buff. Nothing too crazy, and it's definitely a nice little buff. So it's gonna be kind of nice for Magnus mains out there. Lennox changes, man. Lennox is always getting thrown around. Lennox. Speaking of Lennox. This is another really good example of what was a stat stick. So Lennox entered this game as a very very dominating force. Dominating presence in the meta. She was very, very strong, but she was very strong backed off of the stats that she had. Her abilities were both next to useless. Fishing was essentially useless. Fishing was essentially a I want to say double-edged sword, but it really wasn't a double-edged sword because you never got the benefits of the other edge. So it was really a single-edged sword where you cut yourself when you use it, if that makes any sense. Because fishing 9 times out of 10 would give you a can, and you would just waste 5 seconds fishing. So a lot of times it was just a disbenefit to use fishing with Lennox, and a lot of times people, I mean, people would often use it anyways, but a lot of times people would just not want to use it, and when they used it, they would be disappointed by what they got out of it, by their results. So the change right here, the change they made a little while ago, obviously they nerfed her stats because her stats were very, very overwhelming. And they tried to buff her fishing before, however, it didn't work. Fishing was still next to useless. Blue Snake is kind of a controversial one, I would say. I think the general consensus from the majority of people is that Blue Snake really isn't that powerful, but I personally am a huge advocator. A huge advocate for Blue Snake. I think it's a very powerful ability that, I mean, the reduced hit is so I see where people are coming from because of the reduced damage that you deal at first. I definitely see where people are coming from, but the effects that you put on them, the punishing effect where they move around, couple that with the fact that you can run like pursuit or something, um, I think that makes I think that makes Blue Snake a kind of a slept on ability right now. Like I said, I'm a huge advocate for that ability. A lot of people will tell you differently, but I just want to talk about that very briefly. But anyways, we do have changes right here because, like I said, Lennox really kind of fell out. She went down to a lot less usage after they kind of removed her stats, which I think, like I said, I think William is going to follow suit for what happened to Lennox. She kind of fell a lot off, and people stopped using her because, like I said, she wasn't able to just carry wins off of her stats. But now right here, we've got a bit of a change to fishing, which is kind of cool. 120 seconds cooldown. That's not really that crazy because I think a lot of Lennox players in general. Well, actually, to be fair, like I said before, like Lennox players wouldn't really care too much about fishing, so they wouldn't really notice it that much. But I was gonna say when I played Lennox in the past, I'd never really be in the situation where I was waiting for fishing to be off cooldown. I would just use it whenever I go by a water area because I don't think unless they make fishing like good because right now I don't know what I think about it right now, but right now if you unless you make it like good, I don't think anyone would go out of their way to a water area just to fish. I think they would fish when they get the opportunity as opposed to that. But we got some item dropless updates. The can at 10% still sitting there. That's always a feels bad, man. It feels like that's not 10%. It really feels like that's a lot more than 10%, but it's really not. I feel like meteorite or mithril should be a little bit higher percent chance to find. Like 1% is essentially you're never gonna find it. Like let's be real. I think it'd be cool if it was like 5%, maybe 3%, even like tuna. But 1% is just like it's a non-factor. Got some interesting changes here. All the fish right here. 15% chance to get all the fish, with a 3% chance to get the tuna. So this is actually really cool. I've actually said before in the past that I really think fishing should have a much more significant chance to find fish. Because last time all you really had were turtle shells, and you'll see right here we have turtle shells dropped to 15% as well, which is another, like I said, follow suit with the fish. So I think this is really cool. Plus the fact that we've removed common items from the drop list, which is really, really nice. I definitely want to play test this myself and see how consistently we are going to be getting fish. Because I said before that I really think Lennox should. I really think Lennox should have a better chance of finding fish. I think it should be more consistent in finding fish because the ability is fishing. Like, it makes sense. So I think it's cool because just finding fish is pretty powerful in itself because it's giving you free healing in a sense. You need to obviously build into that healing, but you can just take something like this and then go into a residential area, and it's all good. It's perfectly fine. You can get a wet. You go to a residential area, get a whetstone, kill the dog, and you've got stuff like the Sauri and Mudfish upgrade. Well, technically, you have everything that goes into heated whetstones. That's really cool. But yeah, a lot of the stuff you can just upgrade by going straight to a residential area, which is really nice. Uncommon ingredients going up to 25%. That's an interesting thing. Although, if I'm being honest with you, I don't think I've ever gotten a useful uncommon ingredient from fishing, anyways. So that's that. Sue. Here's another pretty big change right here. So Sue had a pretty crazy win rate. Let's take a look at it right here. We've got 26%, I think, 26%, which is pretty crazy. That's a pretty massive win rate there, right there. So a lot of kind of higher tiers of play, she has been a pretty dominating force, as I kind of said, or not as I kind of said, but I'm saying that right now. She has been a pretty dominating force. She has been very strong. She's brought very pretty good stats, pretty significant stats. She's got a good supportive ability pool build, I guess. I don't know. Both her abilities are pretty good in supporting her. She's got that recovery. She's got kind of a versatile ability in reading, which gives you kind of a lot of interesting things. You got the chance to find the enemy, which is kind of interesting. The bigger thing with that is the next attack dealing the skill damage. You've got the stamina restore thing, which is pretty interesting. It's not really exceptionally too powerful. The chance to find the extra items and finding two. So you've got a very versatile ability in reading. You've got a lot of recovery in pendulum. You've got some pretty decent stats all around, I would say. Nothing too crazy, nothing to write home about, but pretty good stats all around. But what we ended up doing here is nerfing the health growth stat, which is pretty big. It like whenever you nerf the growth, you have to understand that the growth is the most significant part about a stat. So if you look at a base stat, right? If you look at Sue's base stat health and it's 124, if you nerf that by 1, then it's 123, and that's really nothing. That's really nothing, right? But if you nerf the health growth stat from 6 to 5, that's not by one stat. That's by one stat every level, which adds up. It really adds up. And you'll see right here, it has added up a lot. We go from 226 to 209, which is a huge change. Like, this really is a pretty massive change. This puts you down to on level with something like Sicella, I guess. Yeah, I guess it puts you on level with something like Sicella. And before you say like, oh, that's not really too bad, Sicella, it doesn't really matter if it's on par with Sicilla. That's not really too low. Well, Sicilla, the only reason you don't notice her kind of mediocre bulk is because of Agni Bear. So you got a character. You got a character Sue right here. She does have the recovery with reading, and I think that's kind of why. That's kind of the thought process. That's the reasoning of dropping her health down. So we'll have to see if reading is able to sustain it, because we have seen Sicella in the past do something very similar to this. That's why I'm comparing her to Sicella, because they both have instant recovery options, and instant recovery is very powerful in this game. I gotta say that I'm a huge advocate for anything that has instant recovery. Nathapoon used to be pretty good, and he had instant recovery. Obviously, they changed Nathapoon, so like I don't know why I'm bringing Nathapoon up, just because of kind of the lack of instant recovery on characters. But essentially, this is a very good comparison with Sicella, because if you look at Sicella, her max HP stat is also 209. She starts off 124. So their health bars are very comparable. And then you've got Sicella with Agni Bear, and that's going to be giving her some instant recovery every turn. And you've got Sue with Reading, and that's going to give her some instant recovery every 4 turns. Or not every 4 turns, but every 4 times she reads. So we'll have to see how that pans out. I personally think that she's going to be... I don't know. Like I said, these are kind of my initial reactions, so if I had to guess, I would say this might drop her below... this might drop her a little bit to being a little bit less effective than Sicilla. Just because, I don't know, I think Agony Bearer is a little bit more consistent with the healing. Reading takes a pretty significant amount of time, I guess, to really gain the effects, and the healing is only like 15. So my prediction is that I think she's going to kind of drop in effectiveness to being below Sicella in effectiveness. But again, this is just my initial reactions. My analysis on this is that this health change is significant. However, I can't really predict how significant it's going to be. I just can, or I can't like 100% give a perfect prediction as to where she's going to lie. I can just give kind of my educated guess based on her stats, based on other characters and how they have performed. Stuff like that. I think a lot of people are going to stop using Sue for a little bit, because I think they might overreact to the nerf in the same sense that people kind of overreacted to the Sicella nerf. But Sicella has really kind of picked herself back up, and she's really not as bad as people thought she was when she was first nerfed. So that's basically what I have to say. The stamina growth is pretty significant as well, but her stamina has always been, pretty good. If I have to say that. I mean, there's not really a lot to say with the stamina. Like it is a pretty stamina change. It's changing your stamina quite a lot. However, I don't think the stamina change alone is going to be the change. I mean, it might be the what is it? The hay that broke the camel's back or something like that. Because if you put that in tandem with the health change, but obviously, what I'm trying to highlight here is the biggest change is the health stat. Um, Combat change. This is interesting right here. We've got several changes to the Stormbolt. So we've got an up in damage. We've got a drop in amount, and then you got a recipe change. And I'm actually not a huge fan of this. I know a lot of people seem to be on board with this, think it's fine, but I'm not really a huge fan of it because I don't know. You need to use kind of multiple spear handles, and I don't like the idea of just spamming cemetery or spamming temple or whatever until you get two spear handles, and then bringing those two spear handles up to fire station. Like the main thing I want to highlight here is you don't get a thrown weapon until you get Stormbolt, which wasn't really an issue in the past because it was very quick to make. But right now, if you're a throw character, you're going to be using your crew thrown weapons until you finish this off, which really isn't, I guess, that insane to talk about, but it is kind of annoying because you do have to double up on a lot of weapons. You have to double up on your spear handle, you have to double up on your hammers, and I say double up because you're not going to get very far with 15 thrown weapons. Yeah, to be honest, you're not even going to get very far with 30 thrown weapons. You're honestly, you're going to rather have 3 spear handles, and the chances of getting 3 spear handles, 3 hammers, and 3 batteries all before the end of the first round are not that good, I suppose. They're not. I don't know. I'm really not a fan of the Stormbolt right now. I was a huge fan of the Stormbolts in the past. I thought the Stormbolt was very effective, very fast, very good. But I'm not a fan of it right now. I don't think the damage boost is going to be enough to really merit anything. I don't know. Maybe if they increased the what am I trying to say? If they increased the amount of dead batteries you got, I don't know. Nah, I don't know. I'm trying to think what they could do. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of Stormbolt. I know some people will disagree with me with that, but I wouldn't recommend Stormbolt. I'm not a huge fan of it. And again, these are my initial reactions, but I don't like the idea of you needing multiple spear handles to get a to get enough Stormbolts in your inventory. Like I said, 15 is not going to cut it. 30 is not really going to cut it. You really have to get like 3 upgrades with it, and that's going to take that's going to be inventory intensive. That's going to be time intensive, and you're not going to be kind of gaining a lot otherwise. So yeah, I guess those are my thoughts for that. I guess it gives you early game fighting because you can go to the temple and fight people off while you get your spear handles. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of it. We've got food changes. These are pretty interesting actually. Fish stew. I've always been a huge advocate for fish stew. Okay, let's just do that. I've always been a huge advocate of fish stew in the late game. I think in the like obviously in the early game, if you start at the pond, breadfish is pretty nice because it's right there. But I've seen a lot of people in the late game use carp and then use carp into bread in the late game. And that healing is just not going to cut it in the late game. It just doesn't. So I really like the idea of carp into fish stew because 72 healing was quite a lot. It's above average, which is really what you want to be going for when you start going to the end of the mid game and starting into the late game. So it's above average, which is definitely what you want to be going for. The quantity you get is pretty good. But this change is really annoying. This change doesn't really like break anything or make anything bad, but it's definitely a very unfortunate change because fish stew, like I said, like fish stew was very powerful before. So yeah, this is an annoying change. I think if they have the chance to make it are still going to make it, but it's definitely an annoying change. Mudfish soup, 50 down to 44. These are all annoying changes. I think like they're nerfing all this, I guess, to like make way for Lennox. I guess they're trying to pave the way for Lennox. So I guess that makes sense. But yeah, all the pot changes are I don't know. I don't really like these changes. I don't think they were really that necessary. I think at the end of the day now, like you would rather make, or at least I would rather like, especially in terms of mudfish, I would rather mudfish into a heated whetstone. So that makes sense because 344 healings really isn't anything to write home about. 266 healings, that's essentially a turtle shell soup. So that's really nothing crazy as well. I think it would have been better if they either nerfed just the amount or just the quantity you get, or just the amount of healing you get. I don't think they need to nerf both for fish stew, but they did. So that's a little bit annoying. Kind of the majority of the pot recipes, I guess, are going down in quality for a little bit. The other thing here is curry, down 6 to 4, and this is interesting because I think this could make a shift in kind of your priorities as a like for me as a stab character who likes to start very often in the uptown and likes to follow that up very often with going to an area like the school or even the slum. I would always put the highest priority on mocha bread, mocha, which obviously goes into liquor, which obviously goes into mocha bread, and that stays the same. That is still a very, very effective healing item. But my second priority would be the curry, and I would prioritize curry over the chocolate. So that was an interesting thing, but I think that might kind of shift in priorities right now because going down to from 6 to 4, I think if you get chocolate and you are able to actually make those into both boxes, then you are for sure going to have much better healing than the curry. So I think now, like I said, in the past I would take curry over the chocolate, but I think now going into the next patch, I would prefer taking the chocolate over the curry. So a little bit of a shift in priorities right there. If you have access to curry and chocolate and you can only take one, I would take the chocolate and just try to make them into boxes when I can. A lot of times when I have chocolate, I would put a box in my accessory slot, and then if I found a second box, then you can just craft them away, and you don't waste an inventory slot, obviously. So an interesting thing right there. An interesting little change. I mean, curry was pretty strong before. That's going to be a little bit annoying actually for stuff like Zukai as well, because when you think of it, um, Zukai kind of enjoys healing items that have large quantities, but mediocre healing, because he's able to make mediocre healing into slightly better healing, I guess. So stuff like Zukai would really, really enjoy stuff like curry, because of, like I said, the quantity you get, and obviously it starts in Uptown. He can start in Uptown looking for a katana. The fish as well, obviously, high quantities. I mean, 3 isn't really insanely high, but 4 is pretty good. So Zukai would also enjoy these quantities as well. They would really give him a lot of healing. So I think all these changes are really, really annoying for Zukai as well. While we say that, especially the curry one, like I think the curry change is really, really annoying for Zukai because, like I said, like the high quantity healing items is something he excels with using. Drop areas, these are interesting. So nothing, no mudfish at the pond. Mudfish are now at the well, and this is interesting because it could make it's kind of spreading healing around the map a little bit more, which is kind of cool. So it gives rise to, I don't know, maybe well starts if you really want. So maybe hand characters could start the well, get a Windbreaker, get the Knuckles, and then get some healing items to go as well. So that's kind of a cool thing as well. It also is nice for stab characters that want to finish off a Lance of Poseidon. They're going to be passing through the well to get purified water, and they're going to have access to healing items. So that's really nice. It's going to make stab routes a little bit more consistent with their healing. So I definitely am a huge fan of that. I'm a huge fan of whenever they make stab a little bit better. So very, very cool with that. Cemetery, bamboo down from 7 to 5. 7 is a lot of things to have, and arrows down from 9 to 7. So whenever you drop the quantity of these like really large quantity, whenever you drop the quantity of items that have like a very large quantity of those drops in the area, you make it statistically more probable that you'll find the better items that you need. So overall, unless you're going to cemetery for arrows, which isn't really that common, or unless you're going to cemetery for bamboo, which also isn't really that common, then this is almost a strict buff to any character that wants to go directly to the cemetery, which is cool. Which is really cool. And obviously, it's a buff that really pretty much applies to every character that would go to the cemetery. I'm not saying this is a specific buff to a certain player. Um, it's just pretty nice overall. And then obviously as well, like you get 2 potatoes as well. Potatoes are very strong. I love getting potatoes. Potatoes are very, very strong. People forget or people don't realize how strong they are because they don't come into a play very often because you only have a couple of them at the hotel. But potatoes are very, very strong. You can put them into stuff like soy sauce, and I like soy sauce into potatoes. What are they called? Braised potatoes, I think. Yeah, like that healing is really, really strong and really underrated, I think. And it's not really underrated just people don't really talk about it very often just because it's kind of not the most common item to really get. Now we have two more of them in the game, so you have a little bit more chance to find them. I've seen a lot of people saying like, "Oh, this is great. You get healing items at the cemetery." But like, you have to realize this is two potatoes, right? Like, people seem to be under this misconception that it's now going to be very common to find potatoes. It is not going to be very common to find potatoes, okay? You have two potatoes in the cemetery, a lot, and this is in areas with 9 arrows, 5 bamboo. So your potatoes are not going to be a common thing to find at the cemetery, okay? This is going to be like as common as like tuna from the dock. Like, this is not going to be a common occurrence that you find that, but it is a nice additional RNG item that you can find. So it's pretty cool. I like it. I really do like it. If you find it, then it's fantastic. It's also, like I said, Cemetery is direct buffs to areas like Cemetery are super nice because Cemetery is a bear spawn location. So having an area where the bear spawns be very, very favorable, very, very forgiving as an area to just kind of spam to search, that really, really makes things. I guess it makes like quality of life a little bit nicer. I guess because like you're wasting less time. I don't know if that's really the correct term, but it just makes it a lot nicer to search in an area like Cemetery when you're waiting for the bear to spawn. So it's a nice change. It's a very, very nice change. Those are all the changes. We got some interesting ones. We got some juicy ones. The win rates. I want to quickly kind of like look over them pretty quick while we're talking about them.